interesting 30 minutes like I think we've never had before. Chef, I'm setting you up pretty good here. Like we've never had before, because we're going to talk today about sustainable food communication. Usually we talk about the how do we act in a more sustainable way? What are the lessons we can learn from people? It's all about educating ourselves to action. But today we're going to educate ourselves in a really different way. And that is to think about the marketing aspect of all things sustainability. So with that, Chef, welcome. I'm going to do a quick introduction to you, and then we're going to kick this off. So, Chef Zana Alvarado, National Chairperson for the South African Chefs Association Women in Culinary. Your bio is so long. All right, get ready. Here we go. Vice Chairperson for the South African Chefs Gauteng Regional Committee, Chef Brand Ambassador for the WWF SASSI, which, by the way, all that acronym means Worldwide Fund for Nature, a Southern African Sustainable Seafood Initiative. That's a mouthful. Chef Zana is based in Johannesburg, South Africa. She runs her own food production and catering company, Mestizo, focusing on private dining experiences, events, and corporate dining. She recently entered the retail space. Do you ever sleep? With a premium range of ready-to-use pantry products, the Zana Alvarado collection. Her food philosophy is largely influenced by her travels around the world, environmental health, and centers entirely on the farm to table and sustainability. Prior to changing, this is the fun part, prior to changing careers into the culinary industry, Chef Zana was a seasoned media specialist and presenter, having worked in both radio and television, and for global brand Disney as the marketing specialist. In addition, she's a food social media influencer, published author, and the 2023 champion of the BRM National Burger Challenge. You're going to have to send me a picture of your burger. Chef Zana, a huge welcome to this wonderful podcast and to World Chefs.
Hi, Chef Chris, and hello to everybody around the world. Thank you so much. It's my absolute honor and pleasure to be here today. And I'm so excited coming to you live from sunny Johannesburg. And I saw some wonderful greetings coming through from Azerbaijan, Boston, Greece, Iraq, Chef Majid in the UAE, who I had the pleasure of meeting during the World Chefs Congress in Abu Dhabi last year. Hello, everybody. Hope you're all well. And thank you for being here.
All right, so we're going to jump right into this. I can tell, by the way, that you have some media experience. This is really fantastic. So, no, but this is true. You are a unique person in that you bring a whole bunch of different skills to this and different backgrounds. So I just want you to talk briefly on some different facets of your background, just so maybe we understand you a little bit more. So let's start with your background in marketing. Just tell us a little bit about that.
So I worked in marketing in the event space for a number of years, and my last marketing stint for a large global company was as the marketing supervisor for Walt Disney International. Prior to that, I also worked with Warner Brothers Pictures, and I also did a stint with Richard Branson's Virgin Management based in Hammersmith in the UK. So I worked a lot with the red carpet premieres, intellectual properties, managing of merchandising. So all-rounder when it came to marketing in the television and radio space. I'd also been a news anchor for a national radio station here in South Africa for about a year. And I generally do a lot of motivational and public speaking.
Awesome. Okay. So you started marketing and then something in your career sort of takes you into the culinary space. How did that happen?
Complete different ballgame. So when I was in the UK, I was based in London. I worked for a company that was a marketing a company that specialized in events from a marketing perspective. And one of the events that we worked on, or I was drawn in to work on, the campaign for Taste of London many years ago. And this was the inaugural Taste of London that ever happened in the world. So it started off the Taste franchise. And of course, from there moved to different countries. But in that very inaugural event, I got to work behind the scenes with a lot of Michelin-starred chefs and people that you would normally see on television, celebrity chefs, but also those unsung heroes behind the scenes that were doing phenomenal work in the gastronomic space. And that really opened up my eyes to what goes on in culinary. But being based in Europe gave me the chance to travel onto the mainland very often and to see how things were done at grassroots level. And very quickly, I realized that the food story was such a story, a history, not just about how it came to be, but of a people. And
I'm not sure if it is my computer or yours, but Lynn, have we lost Chef Zana?
We might have lost her for a second there.
Okay. We'll try to get her back. In the meantime, oh, there we go. All right, we lost her. In the meantime, I'll recount some stories about. No, I'm just joking. No, but one of the things, and hopefully we can get her back, because we had a conversation before we started here, and when I started in sustainability, and this is a long time ago, really understanding sustainability, getting into it from a chef perspective, there were two things that chefs responded to me with. One was, this is just bizarre. I mean, why do we have to talk about sustainability? We're way past that now. But the other thing that there was this feeling that if you were really pursuing sustainability, if you were really out there trying to make something happen, that it was like almost wrong, if you will, that you would use that for marketing. It felt like a lot of sort of corporate greenwashing. And the point I always made to people was, if, and greenwashing again is, people saying they're doing something sustainable, but not really. But my point was, if you're taking the time to really do this and putting the effort into being sustainable, then tell people, use that as marketing, because as we've seen on other broadcasts, essentially having, that being sustainable and letting people know that you're sustainable, a different set of customers. So why not? Chef, are you back with us?
Can you see me? I am. I can hear you perfectly clearly, but I can't see you right now.
Okay, we can see your picture, which is great, by the way. Oh, and now we can see you.
Now can you see me?
Yes, you're back. Hey.
Yay! I'm so sorry about that. I have no idea. That caught me by surprise.
It's quite all right. This is the global. This is what happens. The fact that we can even do this, and you're in South Africa and I'm in Chicago and everybody's joining us around the world, is something we take for granted, but it's a miracle. Anyways, so you were talking about your culinary background, and I'm wondering if you can sort of give us just a little snippet of your work in sustainability, because this is a trifecta.
Absolutely. So I'm currently the chef brand ambassador for WWF Sassy, and I'm sure most people would be familiar with the little black and white panda logo of the World Wildlife Fund. They're based in Geneva, Switzerland, and locally in South Africa, they have a program called Sassy, which is the acronym for the Southern African Sustainable Seafood Initiative. So many years ago, when we started doing the whole worldwide green movement, I was one of those people who has always believed in the farm to table aspect, and seeing what was going on in the world, particularly with the carbon emissions, the climate change, and how it's affecting large parts of the world, I realized that as a chef, I needed to get a little bit more involved in communicating about this, but also weaving it into how I operate in the culinary space. And that's where I think it's more about a love for the earth, the planet, and our future generations, which is what fuels me. Because ultimately, if you think about it, as chefs, everything we do relies on nature. All the food that we produce comes from nature. And without healthy nature, we simply will not be able to produce good food for ourselves, nor for our clients, nor create a sustainable chain for the future generations.
Okay, so this is why this is so cool today. You have a marketing background, culinary background, and sustainable background. We're all set. So with that, let's jump right into this. So the first question is really, how important is it? How important is sustainability in building a brand personally for you as a chef, or building a brand for the restaurant?
It's incredibly important. I think, everybody needs to know what their starting point is, what it is you want to communicate, and how you want to communicate it. What is your set of values? And when you create your brand, you need to be sure that you defined it and what it stands for to your target audience. And once you communicate that to your target audience, it's very easy to tap into giving them what they need. For example, when it comes to your brand identity, it increases your brand awareness by giving it a strong foundation, but also it helps you to tap into the mindset or the emotional heartstrings of your consumer. Consumers generally tap into brands that they identify with, that they have common values with. So if you communicate that your brand is about sustainability, that you are environmentally aware, that you are making sustainable choices within your restaurant or your catering business or your company, you're more likely to get yourself a consumer that is going to be loyal to your brand, because they see the end benefits. I think with anything in the world today, people want to know, how does something benefit them? Or how does something benefit their children? And if you can communicate that with your brand, it's incredibly important for longevity, sustainability, loyalty. Also, it decreases your costs, but it also outputs your production. And you get to build something that is not just going to be there for the moment, but it's going to have many years ahead of it. You're setting a firm foundation for your future by entrenching your brand identity according to your values.
That's a great response, and it just makes me think about all the marketing things I sit through, and how especially younger generations, the Gen Zs of the world, etc., are motivated by values. They're motivated to purchase or go to restaurants that have shared values. So yeah, that's super interesting. So let me ask you, so obviously it's important. How do you communicate it? What are the best channels to get that message out? Does it involve things like, storytelling, or, how do you best reach that customer? How do I get the message that I am sustainable, or that I'm trying my best to have sustainable practices? How do I get that message to my customer?
I think these days, people are so motivated in the visual sense. We are bombarded on a daily basis by roadside advertising, highway advertising, social media. It's everywhere. So people are stimulated by what they see rather than what they hear. And so visual storytelling is a very important component of marketing this. And if you can weave a story and weave your narrative into a story, it's a lot easier for someone to embrace it than if you had to just give them dry information. So people want to feel connected to something. And that comes back to your brand. And can you see how your brand is now woven into your storytelling channel? If you're giving somebody something that they can relate to, chances are they're going to identify with it. Chances are they're going to remember it, and chances are they're going to support it. So when it comes to storytelling, it literally establishes a connection with your customer because it creates a more compelling approach.
So give me an example. It can be even fictitious. Let's put this into super practical terms. So I'm a chef. I'm cooking in my restaurant. I'm trying to do the right thing. What is the story? What could that look like? And where would that story be? Is it a social media story? And I guess being super specific, what would that look like visually? Again, just make it up if you want.
There's lots of things you can do. You can do you can do it by illustrations or images in your menu. If you want to put your story in your menu, the moment you open a menu and your story is there, generally when people are waiting for their meals to be served, they read it, or before they even peruse the menu to see what they'd like to order, they read your story in there. So that's a really great way to get it in directly in the customer's hands. A second way would be to use social media to your best advantage. It's a great marketing tool, and it's very underused in in a lot of circumstances too. In the restaurant industry, social media is so important, especially for chefs wanting to tell that story. Videos is so important. Lives, like how we are doing right now, is so important to really tap into and reach the end user or the customer. For example, in your menus, you could do pictures of beautiful, fresh ingredients on a lovely tabletop. You could show on social media video of somebody plucking fresh fruit from an orchard or pulling veggies out of the soil, and then showing that narrative of that farm to table route of how it ends up on the end plate. Alternatively, you could show a picture of a happy family with smiling children eating together, showing the whole sustainability thing and the enjoyment of coming together as a community. This really helps to tailor your brand story so much more, as opposed to having to say, go and purchase sustainable food. It's so much better if I can see that my carrots are being harvested and it's being put on a truck and it's coming to me. That farm to table journey is so important because consumers nowadays do want to know where their food is coming from. And the emotional storytelling, once you tap into somebody's heartstrings and they know how they're benefiting, what's coming onto their plate and where they're coming it from, chances are you've got a consumer for life that's going to support your brand.
That's so interesting. I love this discussion because, a lot of times people will say, when we're talking to restaurateurs about how can you be, chefs, how can you be more sustainable? And there's always this thing about, yeah, but it's going to cost more money. And then we go to the ownership and they're like, well, I'm not so sure about that. But actually what you're saying is, if you're doing the right things, and maybe it costs a little bit more money in some instances, but you can capture a whole new set of clientele, and a set of clientele that will be coming back and they will be, dedicated to you. That's how we can use this from a business perspective.
Exactly. So one of the things that I do with my clients is to educate them in very subtle ways, whether it's through communication or it's a newsletter, or it's a little thing that I've put at the end of my quotations, just so people know exactly where their food is being sourced from. So on my menus, I would always we use green listed seafood in all of our menus. We use sustainably farmed beef in all of our menus. All of our beef is ethically farmed. Our vegetables are ethically farmed. And to also understand, to make people know that it's not just sustainable, but it's also responsible. So there's a huge difference between what is sustainable and what is responsible. And if I could just share a little bit about that. For example, you may use a green listed seafood that is a sustainably farmed seafood or sustainably produced seafood, right? Say it's wild caught. Wild caught, for lack of a better word, would have to say it's organic. But then you ask yourself, is it really organic? If it's wild caught, has it still been treated with pesticides to kill off any viruses or bacteria? So there's a whole big, question mark around that. But say you've got something like tilapia, which is fairly sustainable, right? And you use it in fine dining. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love fine dining. But if I'm having a tiny piece of tilapia like this on my plate, what's happening to the rest of that fish? How is that fish being used? Is it being thrown away? Is it food waste? Is it being used for fish stock? Is it being repurposed? So you can take a sustainable fish and have on your menu that you use sustainable fish, but is that sustainable fish being used responsibly? So I think that's a question as chefs we need to be asking ourselves. And we need to communicate it to our consumers in our menus to say, we use top to tail. This might be a fine dining restaurant, but all of our food produce is being reused and reused in a good way to create additional dishes. So it's all about reuse, repurpose. It's a whole big thing, I always say reduce, reuse, and repurpose. There must be transparency. There must be traceability. You must know where your food is coming from and use the whole thing.
And very importantly, to let everybody know. Now, a couple really fast questions. What about things like awards, certifications? Does that matter? Is that something chefs should go after in the sustainable space?
Yes, I think it is vitally important because it does communicate to your end consumer that you are going the extra mile to actually be sustainable and responsible in your usage. Every country should have some sort of an environmental body that's monitoring these things. For example, in South Africa, we have SASSI, which also has created something called a Fish ID. Now, Fish ID is a very simple, free to download app that you can just download onto your cell phone. And when you go out to your fishmonger or to a supermarket to actually purchase whole fish, all you do is you activate the app, you scan the body of the fish, and it immediately identifies what species of fish that is. And then you go onto your Sassy app, type in the name of that fish, and it will tell you immediately whether it's a green listed, meaning good to purchase, orange, meaning beware, or red, meaning endangered seafood. So, tap into what you've got in your country and use those, and then put them onto your menu so people can see exactly who your affiliation is to. So when I go into a restaurant or a seafood grill here in SA, the first thing I look to see if whether the Sassy app is actually on their menus. And I get very, very excited to know that it is, or I see it on a table talk and I think, right, I wouldn't mind eating dinner here. I wouldn't mind spending my money here because I know that they're affiliated to doing the right thing with the right bodies. So I would encourage anybody listening today, that should be your port of call. Find out who's doing it in your countries, affiliate to them so they can give you the right guidance, they can give you the right information, and also assist you with marketing in your actual restaurant or outlet.
I love that. We've talked many times on these webcasts that, we are not all the experts in sustainability. We have to rely on others to help us, which is great.
Yes.
So we talk a lot about the sustainability equation, energy, water, waste, food, and there's lots of stuff under food. But from a communication standpoint, is there one of those categories or one area that you would recommend somebody starting there? And the reason I say that is, if somebody's doing no marketing right now and they're like, wow, they're watching you, we're going to finish in 8 minutes or so. And they're going to be like, I need to do something with this. Where do they start? Should they focus on, seafood or farm to table or food waste? Where would you recommend they start?
So I think, the first thing that we need to realize is when it comes to sustainability, there are 4 very distinct parts of sustainability. It's the human, the social, the economic, and the environmental. And you need to look at to see which of those impact you the most. I mean, when it comes to just sustainability in the kitchen alone, we can talk about food, we can talk about energy consumption, we can talk about water, we can talk about food waste. All of those play a role. In my opinion, it's very unfair to take one out and say, let's deal with this one first. And the reason for that is that they are all interconnected. They are all interwoven. So you need to look at your specific industry or your specific space to see what is communicating with you, what you need to actually focus on first, and then slowly bring in the others. For me, living in Africa, food waste is probably the most important one that we need to focus on. And I'm sure in many parts of the world, food waste is a very big issue too. And the reason I say this is when we look at the amount of food that is wasted per annum, if we had to reduce that significantly, there would be less hungry bellies in our city. South Africa, for example, produces enough food per annum that nobody goes hungry. But we are an export country. Most of our good stuff is exported. And so, sadly, 3.3 million children a day live on one meal a day. And during COVID, many of them didn't have any. This also brings us down to eat locally, shop sustainably, and shop ethically by supporting local fisheries, local farmers, small businesses, because then you know where your food is coming from. And when you are able to invest by purchasing locally, you are invigorating your own economy. You're creating more jobs within your own space. And that is something so important. And I think if anything COVID has taught us, when the whole world shuts down, you have to rely on your own country because you're not getting it from anywhere else. So the more you can focus on seasonal availability, it's better for you. It reduces your cost because produce is in abundance during season. I'm a huge advocate for having seasonal menus. That way, you use produce that is in the
Uh-oh. Lynn, did we lose?
I think we lost her again, but I'm sure she will join us.
Yeah, she will. So we only have a few minutes left, everyone. If you have a Q&A, I have one here, which I may answer, but let's just wait maybe a half second. But I think that one of the really interesting things, just going back on some of the comments she made many interesting comments, but one of them is, as chefs, there's so much that we can do to get our own messaging out. And I know we're all busy, and heaven knows I'm not the best on social media, but the reality is that as a chef, harnessing social media and harnessing your menu space as a way to get your message out is very effective. And I think this whole concept of storytelling is huge, because humans relate to storytelling and have always related to storytelling. So the more stories that you can tell about what you're doing in your space will attract more clients. So take the time to think about that from a storytelling standpoint. I'm going to just go ahead and maybe answer this one question we have here, which was really interesting. I was reading recently that Michelin restaurants and chefs have recorded more than 60% food wastage in their restaurants as while presenting a plate. So do you agree that this so-called path of fame is totally unsustainable and is really necessary to carve a carrot just to get that perfect little nibble for presentation? Super interesting question. And I think my response to that would be, when I started in the world of culinary way back when, in those 2- and 3-star Michelin restaurants, that's exactly what we did. I mean, our food waste was huge. Now, truthfully, if you carved a carrot, a lot of that went into a stock or something, so it wasn't technically waste. But I think there's a really fun trend today among the top restaurants in the world that embracing imperfection and nature as it is a much bigger trend today. And so that's all part of that whole farm to table movement. So I would expect that sort of, getting everything perfect with huge amounts of food waste, that is changing, absolutely changing in our world today. All right, so there's one here about cruise lines. I'm not so sure I can speak directly to that, since I've never worked on a cruise ship. I think, Lynn, we're just about out of time. Unfortunately, it looks like technology has beat us today a little bit.
Yes. Somehow it has never happened to us before, but
No,
I think
in 3 years, this is the first time. Oh my goodness. So we I guess we have a very good track record here. But I think, given the fact that we're just about out of time here, I'm going to say a thank you to Chef Zana. I think also, and Lynn, tell me if we can do this, but if any of you who are watching have a question for her, if you want to send that to Lynn, and we can get that to her, and hopefully we can get a response directly to you, that would be great, because I feel bad cutting this off, but I think that's the way, unfortunately, it's going today. But what a pleasure it was to have someone like her. And maybe, Lynn, we can maybe try to get her back another time, because I think there's a lot here to learn and a lot more specifics we can get into. Because again, I have heard from many chefs that they need help making a business case on why they should be sustainable. And I think what Chef Zana was talking about today is, yes, it's important to be sustainable, but it's so important to get that messaging out as a vehicle to drive business back to you, to drive profits, etc. So with that, a huge thank you to our chef who joined, who's not here, unfortunately. And a huge thank you to Lynn and all the folks in Paris that make all of this happen. And of course, to the whole Feed the Planet committee, some of whom have joined us today, and our partners, Isaac and Electrolux Food Foundation. And of course, to all of you, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Time is the most important gift, and we super appreciate the fact that you're here with us. So we'll see you in a month. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Chris.